Identity matters, but here's the thing, well, how do I raise my identity? The easiest way is to get in rooms like this. If you're scared of success, it's because you may be the most successful person you know. I spent 2 hours in my sunroom with my in-laws because they could not understand their fucking son-in-law.
How do you deal with a fear of success?
That's a great question. There's levels to everything. I don't know if you guys have realized this, that no matter where you start and you get to some place, there's another level. It just never stops. There was a point in my career where I was playing small because I was scared to play big, because I knew if I actually achieved that bigger thing, that would have to be my new level, or all of a sudden I would feel like people... See what I'm saying? A lot of people don't get this because everybody's just like in such a hole and they just want to be successful that anything just feels good. But once you actually start succeeding, there's actually this like, oh shit, I can't believe I did that. But if I keep aiming higher and then I get there, now I've got to hold on to this. And then you're like already like, oh, the plates are spinning. And then you're like, fuck, if I get even higher, then what if the whole thing comes toppling down and everybody thinks I'm a fraud? And what happens is people set up camp. They're climbing that mountain. It felt good when they had nothing because anything was something. And then they climb and they win and they succeed, and then they end up to this place where it's like, shit, I never thought in my life I would get here. And if I keep climbing, I'm gonna have to maintain this new standard or this expectation. So I'm just gonna sit there. And I talk about it in my new book. Essentially, entrepreneurs get to a place where either stall their growth, sabotage. They don't wanna say out loud, I'm good. So instead they start making decisions, consciously, unconsciously, that sabotages their growth. Or they decide I wanna sell, because it's a lot easier to sell than to become the person who could deal with the problems they're now facing. So my rule for solving this is to focus on the identity. All of this is a byproduct of who you think you are. When I was overweight, 265 pounds, sedentary, never worked out, whatever, I did not consider myself an athlete. And what had to change is I had to change the belief I had around who I was and how I showed up in the world. And then through that new identity, through writing it down in my 5-minute journal, through making a commitment, through speaking it into existence, and like when I have no proof in my life that this would ever happen, I mean, I wrote down I was a Ironmaner for 4 years. 4 years. Made no sense. Every morning, 5-minute journal, I am an Ironmaner, I am an Ironmaner, I am an Ironmaner. I couldn't swim. It's the first activity in an Ironman. This past summer, I swam 5 miles across a lake. So identity matters, but here's the thing, well, how do I raise my identity? The easiest way is to get in rooms like this. See, right now, if you're scared of success, it's because you may be the most successful person you know. When you start getting into other rooms, because there's levels to this, and your environment is you're now the bottom guy on the totem pole, just through that osmosis, you're gonna wanna play a bigger game because they're holding you to a higher level. And it doesn't matter if it's being a parent or an entrepreneur or getting yourself in physical fitness, right? If you're not happy with your health, go find the healthiest people you know and spend time with them. And when you go for lunch and you were about to order pizza and they order a salad with some protein, you're probably gonna make a different decision. Does that make sense? That's probably the fastest way to overcome the fear of success, is working on the identity through your environment. It doesn't matter how warm I mentally tell myself I am through meditation if I'm sitting inside of an ice cooler. Does that make sense? If I'm in a deep freeze inside of those restaurants, commercial grade with the big doors, and I'm inside, I could be there zenned out telling myself I'm warm, I'm warm, I'm warm. Or go visit the desert in Palm Springs, or Vegas in the middle of summer, or Austin in the middle of summer. Like, it is like there's heaters on you, and that just naturally will raise your identity.
I wrote first a different question down, but I got to, I think, a bigger question, and maybe it's like a really vulnerable one, but my parents always told me, like, yeah, do this exit because it's safer and you get 100K or $1 million, and I never did it. Like, how do you deal with imposter syndrome you get by negative people in your community? They go like, go work for a boss. I mean, but there are so much levels of people which give this really negative advice, and I think it's the wrong people to be in the proximity of course, but sometimes you need to be around them. Like, how to go with that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Anybody else at any point in their life deal with imposter syndrome? Just show of hands. If you don't raise your hand, it's just real. It never stops. Like, this is the thing, it never stops. I had it last Wednesday when I was at an event, and I was the bottom guy on the totem pole in this world that I do here. You guys might see me on this stage and be like, well, everybody knows Dan, blah, blah, blah. Let's be honest, nobody knows who the fuck I am. Like, you guys laugh, but 0.00000, like, I'm nobody in this big,
that's true. Like,
world.
even if like 3% of the world knows you, there's like
you're nobody.
Yeah.
Unless you're The Rock, you're nobody. Let's. Okay. This is actually a friend of mine said this once. Until people start dressing as you on Halloween, you're nobody. I grew up, much like you guys, probably with parents that were always telling me what to look out for. And no matter how successful I was, they were telling me what I should consider, all of it. You know, where I should live and who I should, and all this stuff. And then you have friends that knew you when you were in high school, and you went on this journey of personal growth, personal development, hopefully. And then you started having some success, but they still see you as the guy that they knew in high school, right? And here's the crazy part, is if you actually are on this path of personal development and growth, even within a 12-month period, team members that knew you in January still treat you that way when you spent 12 months working on your personal growth and development. You know, I always kind of joke with my friend, I haven't seen you in a while, let me reintroduce myself, because I ain't the same person, because I'm doing the work, right? And when they show up and they treat me that way, but I understand it, right? Because I haven't earned that faith yet, because they're like, I thought you were this way, right? Some people don't like it. Why? Because I've raised my standards, and just by being around me, they go, well, what the fuck? You think you're better than me? I don't. I fucking love you. But I know where I'm going, and you're just on a different journey, and that's fine. If you ever decide you want to go this way, I will be the first person to take the call. But until you make that decision, please let me go. I want to run. You guys have it in you that if you know there's people in your life that are acting like an anchor, just create some space. I can love my family, I can love my friends, I can love people I went to high school with. That does not mean that I have to spend this weekend at their barbecue because it's their birthday. I don't. I make that decision. I believe people come into your life for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. A reason to teach you a lesson, a season to inspire you to another level, and a lifetime to be your ride or die. In regards to how I put into context their questions, comments, or feelings if I do have to interact with them, here's my question. Is there some aspect of that feedback in the way they live their life that inspires me that I want to learn, so I'm going to listen? I love my dad. My dad's my hero. I love him. I talk to him every day. But he also knows, because we had to have this conversation, where I'm going, he hasn't been. And although I want the advice and the feedback, I'm actually not the person to be asking those questions. So when we used to talk, he'd be like, well, what about this part of your business? I go, that's Johnny. You want me to call Johnny, call Matt, call Ant? I don't know. And I don't want to know, because that's not what I should be working on. And it took a while, and I had to have a conversation. I had the same conversation with my in-laws. I spent 2 hours back on the East Coast when I lived there in my sunroom with my in-laws, because they could not understand their fucking son-in-law. Can anybody relate with that? Yeah. Perfect, good. That's why we're here. I don't get Dan. They would tell my wife, Renee, and then Renee would tell me. And I go, okay, we got an option, one of two. Stop telling me, or we got to sit down and have an intervention, because it's kind of fucked up. They're staying in our house and they're talking shit about me. Not super shit, but I don't get Dan, and this morning he walked by me and look, when I'm working, I'm heads down. Just because I work around my environment, when I'm in the zone, you know, and I just let people know that. And now we actually have a rule. When you come stay at our house, these are the rules. I have a doc called Working with Dan, Google Doc that we share. Right? I don't want you to be offended. It's important for people to understand how to work with you. Here's the other thing. I also know no matter how much I tell them, no matter what I share with them, they're going to be offended. No matter what.
True that.
You didn't return my call. You're not willing to take my call. You're not replying to my emails, whatever. And I also realize that's them, not me. And I can still love them for their humanity and who they are. And I understand where that comes from, because I used to be that. And I think when I get further along, I'll look back and I'll be like, oh man, I was so mad at this person and it made no sense. And so I always ask myself, is the person giving me feedback, have they achieved the thing that I want to do? Because it's not like people say, oh, you shouldn't worry about what people think. No, I actually do deeply care about what people think. I care what every person in this room thinks as a customer and a client and a friend. I care what my mentors think, because they've been way out here, and I'll ask them proactively, here's what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think? I want that feedback because I'm aligning. But if some friend from high school leaves a message on my Facebook post, I don't even get upset about it. I actually, like a lot of people on social media talk about their haters. If I have haters, I don't know.
So last follow-up maybe, how do you manage your state again? Because sometimes you like get affected by something, could not like be really true, but it still affects you. Like how do you get in state again?
There's levels to this, but if you're not meditating and aware that you have an ego that's shit talking to you all day long. Some people have never heard this. I'll hopefully gonna shine some light. There are two voices in your brain that are talking to you, and I can prove this because there's the one that's speaking and the one that hears it. Think about that. There's a voice. You know, when you're sitting there and it's talking, hey, you shouldn't say something, you shouldn't raise your hand, you shouldn't ask the question, you're not good enough, don't send that email, blah, blah, blah. That's the ego, and its job is to protect you, and it shit talks you. And then there's the pure you and self, that is God, or whatever you want to call it, your spirit, your higher power, and they're in conflict. And this guy's there to protect you, is protect your body, but we don't live in the tundra of Africa anymore, so we don't need to be aware of like the news and all this stuff. So like there's levels to this, there's trauma that's real, just all this work. So how do you overcome it? Start with meditation, be aware that there's a voice, and do the work. And when I say do the work, search doing the work on Google, and you will find books on doing the work that will help you with your mind, because I'll tell you, the more you work on you, you will be so much more powerful for your team and so much more powerful for your kids. You'll be so much more powerful for your wife, your partner. Look, guys, I'm gonna teach you how to scale your SaaS companies, but that's not why you're here. We're here to understand who we are and how to become a bigger, fuller version of that, and how to shine our light so powerfully that we're not a tugboat running around in the ocean trying to correct other boats' passages. Instead, we stand as a lighthouse, shine our light as bright as fucking possible as an example that when other people are ready, they decide to come ask you how you got there, and in that moment, they're giving you permission. And that is why I do what I do.